It's post time for the Win Place Show. Salutations and welcome, friends. I'm your host, Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace, and welcome to another episode of the Win Place Show, a program devoted to all aspects of horse racing and handicapping that is proudly part of the Trust the Profits YouTube network. Now, before we get started, just a quick reminder, make sure to subscribe to Trust the Profits on YouTube. It's the best place to get all of your horse racing news, live reactions, race recaps, graded stakes previews, capping the card, the Win Place Show, doubling down with Colin Sheehan, Derby prep news with Colin Sheehan. There's so much content that we have coming out every single day, every single week. And I also want to say welcome and thank you to the new subscribers. We've been checking the numbers. We're up to almost 7,500 subscribers. We're so thrilled to have you here on our channel. If you just joined us, really excited for this run to the Roses and run through the Triple Crown. It's always an exciting time. And of course, last weekend, the unofficial start of the Derby prep season kind of kicked off with the LECOMTE Stakes. But just a quick reminder, you can also get all of this great content if you follow me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. And this week, of course, we are going to be having an absolute ton, avalanche full of coverage for Pegasus World Cup, as well as some of the great stakes races at Oaklawn Park, particularly the Southwest Stakes, another big Derby prep race with a really big horse we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But that said, we have a ton of news to get to over the last week. And so we will start by recapping some of the biggest news that's coming out of the sport recently. And that was, of course, what happened at Fairgrounds last weekend. And we're not going to bury the lead. We'll start right up at the top and talk about the LECOMTE Stakes, the 14th and final card on that epic Saturday card at Fairgrounds. The rain held off pretty well. It was pretty decent weather. We were worried, was it going to be sloppy? Was it going to be muddy? Well, the LECOMTE Stakes went off. We did have a couple of scratches, obviously. Itzo's scratched. Tappett's Conquest decided to run in the 9th race. Brad Cox moved that horse to the 9th race. The horse didn't decide to do it. Brad Cox decided to do it, but he ran in the 9th race. So we ended up with a rather small 6-horse field in the LECOMTE Stakes. And of course, won by Instant Coffee, who earned a 92 buyer speed figure for his effort, earning that 20 points for the Kentucky Derby trail and asserting himself as certainly a legitimate contender later on down the road. Now, I'm on record as, listen, if you watched my episode last week of Capping the Card, I picked Instant Coffee to win, gave out a few other longer priced winners as well, gave you a 5-1 winner, a 10-1 winner throughout the card. So you made some money if you listened to me last week. But talking about Instant Coffee and the LECOMTE, I like this horse in this particular race. I thought the race set up perfectly for Instant Coffee. I thought that happened on paper ahead of time. This is a horse that is a closer, but in a small field, I feel like he doesn't give himself too much to do. And there were a lot of speed horses in this race. Echo again went out. Confidence Game went out. Bromley went out. You had a few horses going out pretty aggressive on the front end. They ran a 47-1 opening half, which was significantly faster than what the Louisiana Stakes, the race right before, was run for 4-year-olds and up. So they were running at a much faster clip in that in the LECOMTE. And so sets up perfectly for Instant Coffee. Just, he's going to sit back and then he's going to go. And when the others tire, he's going to kick in. So, it kind of went the way you would expect. 2 fills, finishing second, nice effort. I thought 2 fills was kind of Instant Coffee light in some ways. And I don't mean that to be a pun about coffee or anything like that, but I really did think he was a little bit of kind of a slightly lesser version of Instant Coffee, which was sit mid-pack, maybe a little further back. Some people thought 2 fills might be in the lead. I didn't think that was going to be the case. He's had success in the lead, no doubt, but I thought that he would probably sit mid-pack or a little further back, and that's kind of what happened. And so, again, everybody else tires. He's able to go. He's a very nice horse. He's definitely moved up in my Derby rankings. He was unranked in my Derby top 25 initially. He definitely moved up into the lower teens. He's a good horse. Here's my concern about Instant Coffee, though. I just don't trust that running style when you start getting 15, 20 horses. And you kind of saw that already with Instant Coffee. When he faces a really big field, like he did at the Breeders' Futurity, it didn't work out very well. I worry about that. I worry about what pace he's going to get, perhaps in some of those instances when he starts going to something like the Kentucky Derby. I think that's why these prep races is disappointing when there's only six horses. We talk about it happening out in California a lot with those California prep races where it's six horses and four Bob Baffert, horses. And what do you do in those races? You want to see horses run in big fields to some extent, especially horses that are mid pack and closers, because you kind of need to see them. Can they navigate this much traffic? How do they deal with those sorts of surroundings? How do they take kickback? Things like that. So it's important to see that. Like I said, I don't love Instant Coffee in this spot, but certainly, like I said, until you start to see him lose and kind of prove otherwise on the trail, then he's in a good spot right now. He's certainly in the catbird seat, looking out over some of the other horses that are going to be running in the coming weeks. Now, there were some obviously other news coming out of that race. Echo again, who went off at 2-1, which was stunning. Because I don't think that horse wants any part of two turns. I think that is a one-turn sprint horse and potentially a very good one, but he was eased up in the home stretch, and there was some concern about his health. According to Tyler Gaffleone, just felt a stifle lockup, was precautionary, eased up. He was walking around the barn later. He seems to be fine. So Echo again, thankfully okay. I was very open before the race. I was not a big fan of this particular horse in this spot. I just felt like he had every opportunity to show what he could do at the Springboard Mile. He didn't do it there. He didn't do it at the Iroquois. It was like, well, when is he going to all of a sudden show this amazing potential? And it didn't happen again. So I hope they don't keep trying to run this horse at two turns. I think he's better at one turn. He's got nice speed. I think he's a good horse, and he certainly has good pedigree. So there's something to suggest there's talent there. Now, Bromley, who a lot of people started becoming a little bit of a wise guy horse going into the race. Wolf, not a very good effort from Bromley. Itzos, who was scratched from this race and then actually ran at Turfway Park, both Paulo Lobo horses. Itzos scratching from the LECOMTE did not help him from embarrassment as he finished seventh at Turfway Park in that stakes race. So not a great weekend for Paulo Lobo, who we should point out was over 13 in graded stakes races over the last year, which is why I stayed away from Bromley. I didn't really understand the love there. And Itzos I thought was an interesting horse, but nothing more than that. So like I said, coming out of the LECOMTE, I just feel like the top two, Instant Coffee, Two Fills, those are really the two that you really need to, I think, pay attention to. Confidence Game finishing third. Okay, that was a nice effort, but really need to see something more from him. So I think that, like I said, the top two are where you're going to look moving forward. It'll be interesting to see where they get pointed in the fairground circuit or Oaklawn or Tampa or something else in the Southeast. We'll see. Now, I made mention to the fact that the Louisiana Stakes was run just the race before that. And that was actually a very thrilling race between Happy American, Mr. Wireless, and Forza de Oro. Thrilling finish with the three of them going bang, bang, bang right at the wire. Really thought Mr. Wireless was going to get there, man. He was my top pick. His odds went up. I think it was 8-1, 10-1 by post time. So he was a huge price. I had a nice little win. Unfortunately, I had a win place bet, so I didn't lose. I actually made a little bit of money on the place part of it, but really thought he was going to get him home, but Deshaun Parker just could not quite get there. It was not the greatest stretch ride I've ever seen, but I don't think it made a difference in terms of the outcome of the race. But a very gutsy effort from Happy American. Great effort. Don't want to take anything away from that horse. Tremendous effort there from James Graham. Then you have Zozos, who was in that race, who was the odds-on favorite, the big Brad Cox horse, finished fifth. That horse, again, if you listen to me on Capping the Card, he was a quick fade for me. I just didn't like him in this particular spot. I didn't think he was ready for it necessarily. Thought this might be a little too much too soon to some extent. And I just don't know how good Zozos really is. I think there's, I think there's some debate there now about what level is this horse really at? Is this horse kind of an allowance level horse? Is this horse maybe a listed stakes horse? Maybe. But, in a grade 3, he kind of came up short. So, we'll see. Maybe another time back, third back on the form cycle. Maybe you see a little bit more out of Zozos next time out. But I think there'll be some some reflection in the Brad Cox barn about where to send Zozos next. Now, those two were the greatest stakes races at LeComte, but there were a lot of great races on the undercard. Race 9 in particular, won by Determinedly. That was another horse I gave you as a winner on Saturday, and that was a horse that really unexpectedly wired the field. And I say unexpectedly because Invulnerable, who was to Determinedly's outside, was kind of, if you just ran the race on paper, was pretty clear early speed. Determinedly likes to be forwardly placed, no doubt about it, but he's never really been a horse to wire the field. And so it was surprising to see him go out and to see Invulnerable make the decision to rate, which I don't think that was the right decision for that horse. But nevertheless, Determinedly manages to wire the field in race 9, holds off Tappett's Conquest, who, of course, is the Brad Cox horse who was entered in the LeComte and ended up, Cox ended up moving the horse to the 9th race instead. Tappett's Conquest makes this furious charge at the end, but Determinedly hangs on to win. I didn't love the ride by Tappett's Conquest, but I also think this was his first race off the bench in a little while. So I think he might just need a second race. That's all. Or he needed this effort. Second time out, I think he's, certainly a horse to pay attention to. Now, what's interesting about the 9th race, the 13th race, and the 14th race. The 9th race was this race won by Determinedly. The 13th was the Louisiana Stakes. The 14th was the LeComte. What's funny is all three of those races finished in almost the exact same time, 143 and change. Okay. What is, I think it was 143 or 145 and change, but they were all within, I want to say they were all within 0.2 of a second of each other. Okay. So they're not a huge amount of discrepancy in terms of final time. However, the pace of all three were so radically different. So in race 9, they basically went 25, 49 for the half, 113 for the 3/4. In race 13, which is again the 4-year-olds and up, they go 25, 49 and 3, 115 for the opening 3/4. And then in the LeComte, they go 24 and 1, 47 and 1. So they go almost over 2 full seconds faster than the Louisiana Stakes for the opening half, and then 112. Full 3 seconds faster for the opening 3/4. Again, setting up perfectly for a horse like Instant Coffee. Now, this is where people who, think speed figures are gibberish might kind of chime in and go, well, now, wait a second. If they all finish the same time, and you're telling me that the pace of the 13th race was glacial, how is it that Happy American, who won the 13th race, gets a 96 Beyer speed figure, which is the highest of the group? Instant Coffee gets a 92, and Determinedly gets an 84. Listen, I don't calculate the speed figures. That you can talk to Andy Beyer about that. You could talk to, all the folks who do those sorts of things, and talk to them about that. But it was interesting to see the paces of those three races and how different they were. Now, there were also some main special weight standouts on that Fairgrounds undercard that I want to mention that I think have some potential Oaks and Derby implications. First was First Defender. Steve Asmussen horse looked very, very good on debut. Quality road colt, drew off late and showed, I think, a lot of class. That was one of the easier wins, I think, on the card, honestly, from First Defender. So very good colt for Asmussen. The horse I really loved, which I loved going into this race. I should have picked her on top. She was my top value play, but she went off at 10-1. Mariah's Appeal by Phil Bauer. Man, she looked excellent. I mean, she had been firing off some very nice 5 furlong works, and she holds off the Brad Cox filly Merlaza to win her maiden. That was so Mariah's Appeal. Keep that name in mind. Filly out of Distorted Humor, I think, very, very good horse, has a lot of speed. Really like that. Here's an interesting part from a pedigree standpoint. Merlaza, the Cox filly who finished second, her dam, Mi Vida. Get this. She's had 4 offspring. 3 of her 4 offspring finished second in debut, now including Merlaza. So there's a little bit of a trend there. So if you see another Mi Vida filly or colt next time, she gives birth, second place would be a good bet. Yeah, that seems to be where they finish. Two of her other offspring kind of broke their maidens next time out, basically, and were very precocious. I think Merlaza is a nice filly. We'll see what her upper end looks like eventually. Then there was I thought a very nice colt for Cherie DeVoe, Cagliostro, who won, I think, the 4th race on the card. This was a horse that was 4-1 on the morning line, who got bet way, way down because the morning line favorite scratched. And I was not a big fan of the morning line favorite. Cagliostro is my top pick. But with the scratch in the morning line, everybody's money went to Cagliostro for Cherie DeVaux. I think that's a horse to look out for as well. I really like that horse quite a bit. This is a horse that ran in a very nice maiden special weight at Saratoga over the summer. The winner of that Saratoga maiden special weight actually came back to win a grade 3 2 races later. Cagliostro hasn't run since that race, comes off the bench, breaks its maiden at Fairgrounds on the LeComte undercard. So I think a horse to keep in mind for a trainer I really trust in terms of Cherie DeVaux, particularly getting him ready off the bench. So one of the other storylines from Fairgrounds that you might have seen was the turf. One of the races got taken off the turf. That led to a slew of scratches. But the Fairgrounds turf and the two races they ran, it looked like those horses and jockeys were out on Bourbon Street the night before because of the way they were weaving and bobbing all over the track, avoiding bad spots of the turf, avoiding areas where they're afraid of maybe the horse taking a misstep, etc., avoiding some of the sloppier parts of the turf track. It was wild to see how far out in the course they ran a lot of these horses. They would kind of dive in to save ground around the corner, and then they'd kind of go way back out to the very far outside rail to finish up down the middle and outside part of the track. So it's just wild to see how the jockeys and horses navigated that turf course. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about this on the show between Fairgrounds, between Gulfstream Park, between Churchill Downs, just the inability to grow turf on the Eastern time zone, as well as the Central time zone. And it's just, kind of baffling. And so, like I said, they've gotten a lot of rain. I think there are some kind of climate reasons you can point to for why Fairgrounds turf has had some trouble coming back, but it's not in good shape. And all you needed to do was see that race and kind of go, oh my gosh, to the point where I couldn't even believe they were actually running on the turf. But nevertheless, they did. So that was a little bit of a race recap from this last weekend. Obviously, a lot of big things there at the Fairgrounds. We'll come back to a lot of race recaps next week at Pegasus as well as Oak Lawn. Now, there is still some more horse racing news, and so I wanted to shift to some trainer updates, horse updates as well. One of the big pieces of news that just came out today was Brad Cox giving a little bit of an update on a horse that a lot of us here like on Trust the Profits, Loggins. Loggins, of course, this horse that dueled with Forte coming down the stretch in that futurity, just lost that race. It was really a great effort. I think all of us who watched that race were so impressed by Loggins, who set really fast early fractions and held on to battle Forte down the stretch. Of course, Forte then goes on to win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So I think a lot of us hold Loggins in very high esteem. Turns out Loggins probably is not going to start working until February now. He's not worked out since that Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland in October. So it's been a minute. It's been 3 months now. It looks like it's going to be 4 months until he's back on the workout tab. Seems more and more likely that his target is not going to be the Kentucky Derby, maybe the Preakness. So it's going to be fascinating to see what Cox does with Loggins. Clearly, he has a lot of belief in this horse, a lot of ambition in this horse. He also seems to be taking this horse very slowly. So there is some question, did he come out of that maybe a little lesser that last race? Did that take a lot out of him? Maybe we'll see. But certainly we'll keep you updated with, more information as some of these trainers start sharing information about horses coming back from layoffs. A horse like Mo Strike or other horses that have been on layoff for a long time now coming back maybe to the work tab. Obviously, we'll keep you updated with all of that here on the Win Play Show. Well, if you've been following West Coast racing at all, you know that the king of the turf out there on the West is Phil D'Amato. He is the Chad Brown of California in a lot of ways. And he's got a deep bench. He's got a lot of horses coming back here in the next month or two. Hong Kong Harry being probably the first and foremost of those. Hong Kong Harry returning to the workout tab is targeting the Frank E. Kilroe Mile with Barn Nate Balnikoff. Those two are going to be entered in the Kilroe Mile. Ultimate goal for Hong Kong Harry, of course, that BC Mile. So look for those horses to start coming back on the circuit, on the turf, on the West Coast. He also has Comanche Country, which is a really nice horse, I think. Finished 7th in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf, but had some trouble that day. Will be starting works again soon. Expect to see her in the China Doll later in March, but that's another one to keep an eye on. And listen, you're going to start seeing that with a lot of these horses, these trainers who ran horses in the Breeders' Cup. They gave a lot of these 2-year-olds in particular some time off, recoup, continue to grow, continue to develop. They're going to start coming back on the work tab. They're going to start coming back in the graded stakes races. We're going to share all that information with you when it comes. The other news is that Doug O'Neill is sending a group of 6 horses over to Dubai, with a couple of them pointed towards that UAE Derby. And of course, remember the UAE Derby, very critical for gaining Kentucky Derby points for qualification. And I think it's interesting that O'Neill is sending some of his horses over to the UAE Derby because in a lot of ways, California is wrapped up by the Baffert horses in terms of especially this year. He's got a deep bench of really impressive Derby contenders. Now he's going to have to potentially, if they want to run in the Derby, they're going to have to change barns in order to earn points. But nevertheless, those horses are so dominant out there in California. A trainer like O'Neill, I can see him going to his ownership group and going, listen, if you want me to try to get a horse in the Derby, I'm not going to be able to beat some of these Baffert monsters. I'm not going to be able to accumulate these points necessary. Let me go over to Dubai, maybe a little less competition, maybe it's a little bit easier, and I can earn Derby points and get your horse qualified for the big day. So sending over Tall Boy, who finished, I think, 4th in that Los Alamitos Futurity, sending Odd G's as well. You're also seeing a few older horses, I'll Stand Taller, Amy Please, I should say, and Get Back Goldie, as well as Sifting Sands, who ran recently at Laurel. So sending a crew of 6 over there. Obviously, we're going to be covering a lot of those races that are taking place over in Dubai at Meydan, because they do have massive Derby implications. That's where Summer Is Tomorrow qualified last year. Summer Is Tomorrow, of course, is the horse that pushed that suicidal pace at the Kentucky Derby. It's important to know who's qualifying everywhere and whether they're coming over. That's something to keep in mind. Well, let's talk a little bit about what we have coming up this weekend. And obviously, the big news is the Pegasus World Cup and the Pegasus card. 14 races, slew of graded stakes races, obviously highlighted by that Pegasus World Cup Grade 1. Listen, it's not Knicks Go versus Life is Good like it was last year. It's not a bad, I think it's a perfectly good field. Is it a very good Grade 1 field? Probably not, but it's a competitive field and it's a good betting race. And we're going to have a lot more coverage on the Pegasus card throughout the week in terms of giving our top picks, our value plays, how to bet the race, etc. But I think it's certainly interesting to see, Cyberknife entering in his last race, Art Collector potentially entering his last race. You have some West Coast horses coming east in Defunded for Bob Baffert, Stiletto Boy for Ed Mosier Jr. coming back for the 2nd year in a row. So you have this kind of confluence of horses. That said, I mean, there have been a lot of people who pointed out this speaks to just the kind of dearth of quality horses in the handicap division. This is what happens when everybody retires and you don't have a lot of great horses anymore. And you have some nice horses, good horses. There's just not a lot there. I mean, that's why people are excited about a horse like Charge It, who we've not seen in 8 or 9 months, because he at least presents some possibility of being good. I think that's why people were excited about Zozos, because at least there's a possibility that he might be good. So, like I said, we'll see. Express Train, interestingly enough, I just saw just started the work tab again. He's obviously one of the big names on the West Coast in terms of that handicap division. But like I said, we'll see what comes out of the Pegasus on Saturday. The other big news coming out of Gulfstream Park was an outbreak of equine herpes. Horse passed away due to that over the week. So some of the barns have been quarantined. This actually did impact. There was a horse, I believe from Chile, who was supposed to be entered in one of the stakes races, actually in the Pegasus World Cup, ended up not being entered because the barn was impacted by equine herpes. It does seem as if Gulfstream Park has this under control. They have a lot of bio-veterinarians there who are trying to make sure, and biosecurity people who are trying to make sure that everybody is safe down there. But that has been a big piece of news that just came out over the last couple of days. I mentioned Oaklawn having a very nice card. The Martha Washington has a couple of interesting young fillies. But really the focus is that Southwest Stakes. Arabian Night is the morning line, even money favorite in this race. He's an impressive horse to look at for Bob Baffert, who, remember, won this race last year with Newgate coming east. If Newgate can win this race last year, I think Arabian Night stands a really good chance of winning this race this year. I will say Arabian Night could not have looked better on debut at Keeneland on the Breeders' Cup undercard, and has had his form flattered. Why? Because Determinedly, who I talked about earlier, lost by 7.5 lengths to Arabian Night on that Breeders' Cup maiden special weight card. Guess what determinedly has done since then. Broke his maiden, won $100,000 allowance optional claiming since then, back-to-back races. So clearly that was a strong race coming out. And I don't know if there's a ton else in this field. I do like a horse like Red Route One quite a bit. So there's some interesting horses and value in that race. But like I said, I think it all starts and ends with Arabian Night. And then finally, Sam Houston. We've talked about the struggles down in Texas, but Sam Houston is going to be having a really nice card to this coming weekend with the Houston Ladies Classic. And it's just too bad nobody's going to be able to see it unless you live in Canada or you're at the track in Texas. I mean, it's kind of a rough situation there, and it's all because it goes back to HISA and Texas, wanting to exonerate themselves and get out of the HISA situation. So it's too bad because you got Pauline's Pearl, who's a real nice mare. You got She Can't Sing. You got Hidden Connection, I like a lot. 63 Caliber, a horse I really like quite a bit, of Gun Runner. So, you got a real nice field of fillies and mares, and just nobody's going to see it. But guess what? We're going to keep you posted about it. We'll let you know what happens. I'll figure out a way to watch that damn race. And so even if it's on grainy, Zapruder likes YouTube videos, I will watch that race and report back next week as to what happened. Final update. Just wanted to give a really big and heartfelt congratulations to a former guest on Trust the Profits, Sarah El Badwi. Sarah, if you remember, was my guest on my very first Capping the Card when I did the Pennsylvania Derby day card. And I just want to say congratulations to Sarah, previously of Horse Racing Nation. She just announced that she has accepted a position as a production assistant for the New York Racing Association. And so very excited for Sarah to start this new position at NYRA. Wishing her all the best. It's always great to see good people have good things happen to them. And that is the definition of Sarah, who has worked so hard in this industry for such a long time. And she might be very young, and I know a lot of people feel like she's just burst onto the scene. If you get to know her a little bit, she's been following horse racing since she was, before she could drive. And she has been following this sport for well over a decade, and she's still only in her mid-20s. She knows a lot about this sport. She's immersed herself in the sport. She does things the right way, treats people the right way. We're excited for this. She's going to do some on-camera work for NYRA, and so you're going to be able to see her. She was on Talking Horses actually a couple weeks ago with Andy Serling, and Andy was on his best behavior. So you know that when Andy gets along with you, he doesn't get along with many people. So it was very impressive to see her hold her own with Andy a couple weeks ago, and she's going to be doing some more on-camera stuff. So make sure to check out all that she's doing at NYRA. Like I said, we're really happy for her. Hope to have her back on the program, maybe right before she starts or right after she starts again. So big congratulations to her. Well, that's it for this week, but I hope you all enjoyed it. And remember, we're going to be back with so much more content. So make sure to subscribe to Trust the Profits on YouTube. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. We got Capping the Card coming up. We got Doubling Down coming up. We got the Lounge on Thursday nights with El Hombre. We got graded stakes previews with the Formula. We got Oaklawn previews that I'm going to have with Jeff from Charting Horse Values. We got so much content, so make sure to subscribe. Check everything out. Well, until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you the very best and a prosperous day at the track, and reminding you that it's now post time.